So, hello and welcome to another episode of Flying High with Flutter. I am your host, Alan Wyma, and today we have a very special guest. He is Mangirdas, and he created a really cool project. There you are. I just called you creative for right now.
Hello, everyone.
Yeah, we haven't had you on the show in a long time, so maybe you can help to reintroduce yourself, who you are, and maybe talk about last time you're on and what you're on right now, or why you're on right now.
Yeah, sure. Actually, I did my homework and I checked that the last time I was on the show, it was episode number 11. So I think it's 126 or something. So yeah, I think 2 years has passed since then or something like that.
So a long time ago? Really so early in the history?
Yeah. It was episode number 11. So to remind everyone who I am, I'm Mangirdas Kazlauskas. I'm a software engineer from Lithuania. I am Google developer expert for Flutter and Dart technologies. Currently, I'm working at Billow, at a local startup where I'm responsible for the Flutter app and everything around that. And yeah, I'm also creating some content, attending some conferences for talks, doing some mentoring and whatever is related that helps to boost the quality and the confidence in the Flutter community around me.
Well, it's good to have you back on. I mean, it's been a while. I think you've been quite busy, you know?
I mean, it's relative. I mean, everyone is busy these days, and these times. From the last time we talked, I think I changed the company that I'm working in. So previously I was working at a consultancy, and now I'm in a startup. So a very different environment from the point of work. What you're doing, what you're responsible for, and whatnot. So I think that was the main change for me. Other than that, maybe I'm a bit more active in the community. In the public community, I would say, because the last time we talked, I guess it was the COVID times and everything, all the problems around that. And now we have some more flexibility to travel, to attend conferences, to talk, just to meet the community members. So I think that's the main difference.
Well, I mean, it's not much of a problem for you. I mean, because you've been, I don't know how you even say this. But I mean, you've been getting on pretty well. You're pretty busy with kind of creating your projects. I mean, you just created a new one, right? So can you tell us some more about this one?
Yeah. So there's a long story and short. I think I'll start from the short one, and then if you're interested, we could go the long way of how this project popped up. But after the last conference, which was the Fluttercon in Berlin, I made a presentation there as well, and for that talk, I prepared a package on Flutter to create this presentation, and I thought that it made sense to just polish some stuff and just publish it to the pub.dev and make it available for everyone. So that's FlutterDeck, the lightweight and customizable framework to build presentations in Flutter. And the target is to keep it this way, the lightweight, customizable, and easy to use for everyone who are interested, in creating their slide deck in Flutter.
Let's kind of come back to, I mean, before you came on the show, you talked about, how to become a GDE. What was your process? I think you just got into it.
Mm-hmm.
You had an anniversary recently, no? For being a GDE, I think.
Yeah, 2 years. The last time we talked, actually, it was, the beginning of my GDE journey. And I think that was the main reason why I was on the show, just to talk about, what is GDE, because that was quite a new concept in the Flutter community. I would say not that many GDEs were there. Now it's, of course, we have a bigger family now, and you could find more of these enthusiasts, but at that moment, I just started the GDE journey. And I think the status remain. I mean, I'm still a GDE, but everything else, has changed. I think as I mentioned, I'm more active in the community, at least keeping those personal connections and expanding the community, because I established the Flutter Vilnius, local meetup group in Lithuania, and so far, and still, I think the first one there. So yeah, trying to build a community, and that's the main difference. And I think the main impact that I did as a GG.
You wrote some very interesting app. I don't know how do I even say this. The app is it's called FlutterDeck, right? And it seems to be that with Flutter you can build your own. I guess it's built upon Flutter where you can build your own deck, right? I guess it's kind of it's supposed to help people who are Flutter developers, maybe not PowerPoint developers, where they can create a very nice looking presentation. I mean, where'd you get the idea to actually start working on something like this?
And that's a good one, because if anyone checks my GitHub, there is a repository created 2 years ago, which was actually the first iteration on this idea. So when I was working at the consultancy in Debridge 2 years back, I was the first one who owned a Flutter project in that company. That was basically a case study, I would say. We had a client, we made an app, and it was the first one over there. And at that time, I was asked, because in that company, shared knowledge and all of that was more than welcome, I would say. So I was asked to create a presentation about Flutter, and of course, not that many people there, knew what Flutter is at that moment, and also mainly they were focusing on backend technologies, of course, front-end technologies, but not on mobile. So I just thought that I need to make a presentation about Flutter, and how to present Flutter for someone who hasn't really used any cross-platform framework before. Then, building an actual app in Flutter, which is the presentation itself. These are the slides, or when you are showing slides, inside the slides, you could make any interactive stuff. You can embed another app inside those slides. You can, run the animations or any fun stuff. And maybe there will be time I could show you the demo of what I mean there. And that was the first iteration. I just created the project. I created a very simple app with 20 slides, I guess. And when you're creating such app or such presentation in Flutter, obviously you start noticing some patterns. And by patterns, I mean you're noticing that you are kind of using the same templates, or the layout that you want to provide your information inside the slide. You're noticing that you are covering some of the stuff that is, I think, a fundamental part of any presentation tool that you're using, whether that's Keynote, PowerPoint, slides.com, or whatever. You notice that you need to control your slides with your keyboard or mouse. You notice that you need some kind of transitions. You notice to keep track of whatever slide is active at the moment, or how to switch between those and other stuff that it's kind of straightforward if you have experience with creating any presentation in any tool, right? And by noticing these patterns at that moment, I said, okay, so this is the final presentation about Flutter. So it was the introduction, it was basically what Flutter is, what companies are using Flutter, and other slides. And after this project, I announced that, okay, look, I created this kind of project, and I hope that this presentation specifically would be reused by other speakers. So what I meant is that, okay, I have built this app. So if you want to present Flutter to anyone else in your environment, just take this project, definitely if you need that, add your own slides there and just run the same, tool, the same project to showcase Flutter. Obviously, that didn't happen. No one has contributed to that project. I don't know the reason behind it, but I didn't really push it as well from my end. But that was basically the first iteration of the project. I kind of created the framework for creating presentations, but I didn't really publish them publicly, like to PubDev or to any other package. So that was the first iteration there. Then this year on May, I was participating in PL Droid conference. So this is a conference, ironically, that is meant for native Android developers. Also, in parallel, there was another conference, in the same building for PL Swift. So basically, these are native conferences for Android and iOS, and of course, all the talks and all the presentations were there, based on Kotlin, on Android, on KMM and whatnot. And I was also invited to this conference because the organizer said, okay, we have a native conference, but we have also an interest, to show the attendees what are other alternatives that you're using that are, close to whatever you are building. So, and I remember that I had created a presentation in Flutter, and I thought that, okay, maybe that it's time, to revisit this project and try to use it again. But I just checked the code base and I was very not happy about it. And I'm very polite, saying this. The code that didn't really fit my needs at that moment. So it was like 3, 5, 4 months ago. And I decided that, okay, maybe let's go with the second iteration. I have more knowledge now in Flutter and, in public speaking in general. And maybe we could discuss this, of why this framework is needed at all. And based on this knowledge, I just created a framework, but I was very deliberate about it, that I want to create it as a separate package, as a framework, as a separate project from the slides I'm creating. So inside my code base, when you're creating Flutter project, you could create your internal packages. You do not need to push them, to publish them, or you do not need to publish them, but you can just separate this to a separate package. And I did that. I created this, I extracted all of the framework at that moment. I call this framework because it wasn't really published or anything. So I split all the code that is needed to build a presentation to this separate package. And then I created my slides based on that. When I needed to something in my slide, I get to the framework package, I add a new feature there, I change something there, get back to my slides, continue building them and going, back and forth. At the end, I built a framework. And the third iteration was, as I mentioned, in the last conference, Fluttercon, I used the same separate package for this talk as well. And while creating the presentation, while creating the content for this talk, I realized that this framework hasn't really changed that much since the last time, the talk in May. And I realized, okay, maybe this is already stable enough to publish this as a 0.1 version or something like that, but at least to publish this publicly for anyone to use it. And after 2 or 3 weeks, I added some features, I polished some stuff, wrote some documentation, all of that stuff that is needed for when you are publishing a package. And here we are. The FlutterDeck is there on pub.dev, and you can use it if you want it. So that's, the long story from the first iteration to the third one at the moment.
Yeah, that's pretty interesting. And I was looking at the code examples that you have. I mean, there's quite some big changes, right? So, for instance, instead of material app, you have to use FlutterDeck app, right? Now, is that doing is that just building upon? Because I did see that you're relying upon auto-size text, which I guess would probably make sure the text scales properly. Flutter, obviously. Mm-hmm. But you have Flutter Highlight and Go Router. So Go Router obviously is for the routing. What is Flutter Highlight exactly?
Flutter Highlighter is for actually, that's the first contribution to the project, from other person than me. And it's a feature you could have a highlighter widget inside the slide deck. So if you want to provide a code example inside your slide, you just copy paste the code itself, and it would be highlighted, as VS Code style or any other editor style, but it would be just presented in a nice way inside the slide. So package is used for that. And actually, what you mentioned about FlutterDeck app, and Go Router itself, I think that's the main difference, at least at the moment, from other tools that are trying to do the same thing, is that that was a very intentional decision of mine, to use Go Router and to go declarative way, because if you check like the first iteration I mentioned on my GitHub, for like the first time I tried to create anything like that, if you check other frameworks, at the moment it is going the imperative way. So basically, how the whole slide deck is built, you have a single page view component, or you have like index stack. Basically, you have a single component where you put all the slides inside it, and then you have some kind of controller, that is able to switch between slides. But it's an imperative way. Let's say you do not have any deep links to the slides out of the box and anything like that. And I think I looked at the framework when I built it from a more holistic way in a bit. I looked at this not as a slide deck, because if you think about slide deck, you are, at least in my mind, the first idea that pops there is that I have a stack of slides, the stack, and I just go through from the top layer to the bottom one, and I just go through the slides and present them. But if you think about it, the slides or the presentation, that consists of separate slides, it's no different from any other Flutter web app or any other Flutter app in general. It's just a app that has a dedicated pages, but instead of pages, it's just slides, right? So it just made sense, for me to create it this way, that, each specific page is a separate slide that has a separate and individual route, unique route that, that you get right there to the slide you need one. And also you can use all of the benefits that it brings from the declarative routing. Like if you put the URL of the slide with some query parameters, and we could talk about features later on, you could get into a specific part of the slide and anything like that. So that was intentional decision. And basically, why do you need the FlutterDeck app at the root? It doesn't, do any crazy magic over there. Like instead of material app, it still uses material app under the hood, but you just create a FlutterDeck app, since it has some parameters that you should define. Like if you want to specify the configuration for the whole slide deck, if you want to define theming for your slide deck, if you want to, not if you want, you definitely want to put some slides inside this deck. So it accepts a list of slides where you put those. And under the hood, what the FlutterDeck app does is basically creates a Go router. It takes all of those slides from the list and puts those as a separate pages, and it creates the Go router configuration out of that. And then it is rendered as a material app that runs on Go router, and then you have material app running with all the declarative navigation stuff and all the benefits that it brings.
Did you want to kind of walk through it then? Because you're already talking so much about it, maybe it makes it easier. You need to queue up the page, right?
Yeah, sure. So yeah, this is the main README that you see. This image was generated from the keynote. I just exported this. Okay, so the main features, we can go, from top of the list. So as I mentioned, there's no, dark magic or anything. This framework just builds a simple material app that you could deploy anywhere. All the Flutter commands, the same that you're building any other apps, work for you. You just use this framework as a base for your project, for your slide deck, and then you can build this and ship it, deploy the slides anywhere you want. So that was the main reason. That was a very intentional decision to keep it lightweight and to work it this way. I do not want to bring any overhead to this. It just should run normally as any other Flutter app. Navigator 2.0 support, so that was, I already mentioned. Under the hood, the Go router is used, so slides are generated as individual pages, and yeah, you have an app that consists of different pages, but these are linked by using the FlutterDeck app. Also, steps is actually a very interesting concept. So I think there are, in slides.com, if you're using this tool specifically, I think this concept is called fragments, but you could imagine steps are a concept when you want to stay in a single slide, in the same slide, but you either want to reveal items one by one, so you have a single slide but multiple steps inside the slide. Maybe you want to hide some items. Maybe you want to go show an image per image, and also, but I think the simplest example you could imagine is the bullet list. Like if you want to reveal items one by one and stay in the same slide, but reveal items, these are steps. And what's fun and what's really cool, I think, about this is that these steps are implemented as a part of query parameters inside the URL. So since you're using Go Router and Navigator 2.0, so if you put the URL in the URL of a slide and you specify the specific step of that slide. So when you open this web page, it will open the specific slide and also the specific step that you are in. So I think that's really cool. And especially if you have any, discussion on Twitter or any other platform, and it's not Twitter, it's X, right? So if you're having a discussion, you want to showcase, okay, I talked about this in my slide in this specific step, so you can just copy paste the link and the user just clicks on that deep link and it would get at that specific point. So I call this concept steps, and later on I could check how these work in action. Also, there's I think as a global configuration, I think this thing came very naturally if you're using, if you have a background of creating presentations in Keynote or PowerPoint. So basically, there are global configurations, like whether you want to show slide numbers in each slide or not, whether you want to show footer and what kind of information you want to show in the footer, whether you want to show the header. Maybe how you define controls, because in FlutterDeck it's possible to define your custom key binding. So like if you want to use other key than the right left arrow to navigate back and forth inside the slide deck, you can define your own key binding. So you could configure globally your controls. I don't know what's other than that in the list. Whether you want to show the progress bar, you could also specify this. Also, what kind of transitions, because if you specify the transitions, usually you specify those for the whole deck, right? You want all of the slides to have the same transition every single time. So you could specify this globally. And also, what's also cool and also what I tried to do very intentionally is that you define the global configuration once, but each specific slide that you create also could have its own configuration. And if you want to override any value, like I want all the slides to have slide numbers, for example, but for this specific slide, please just, do not show the slide number there and maybe use a different transition. So you can override those in each specific slide. And this is just a base that will be used for the slide deck. You could use those defaults, but if you want to override them, you can definitely do that. So this is the configuration part. Predictable API. So that's also, I think, if you are in the Flutter ecosystem or Dart ecosystem, you are probably using some packages that are very similar to each other. Like especially when Dart introduces the extension methods, and if there's, for instance, like if you have ever used provider package and you just type in context.read or context.watch and you access the provider features this way. So I also wanted to make this API predictable. So for instance, if you are in any widget that is inside of your slide deck, you could just type context.FlutterDeck and then you could get a lot of controls out of that. I think these are mentioned somewhere there. At least I remember I wrote about them. So when you're typing, I can make this a little bit bigger, maybe that would help. So if you want to access the FlutterDeck, you could just type context.FlutterDeck and you access the FlutterDeck, and then you could access a lot of different things from there. So you could access the configuration that you defined for the slide, and also you could access the global configuration I just mentioned. You can access the speaker info, which is also defined globally. And if you want to access your own photo, socials or name, you can do that. And also from the FlutterDeck, you could access controls if you if you want to, I don't know, have a button for some reason inside the slides and, click it and move it to the next slide, or you want to do anything fancy, so you can access those controls, and these will control your slide deck, and you could navigate it this way. So this is about navigation inside the slide deck, and also inside the steps that I mentioned about the steps API. And yeah, also what I mentioned, there are some out of the box components that you could use. To be honest, for the first, for the initial release of this package, I didn't really focus that much on creating as much templates as I can, as much helpful widgets as I can. Like, if you open Keynote on the right side, usually you could see like, okay, first of all, choose the template that you want to use. But maybe you only need the header at the top. Maybe you need 2 columns, 1 column. You want to provide image and text. You want to provide only image, all those templates. Of course, if you think about it in Flutter, these are implemented very, very easily, but that was just not my initial focus. I mean, I implemented some basic templates that I needed for my previous talks I gave, like 2 talks that I gave already using this framework. And actually, these talks could be found at the bottom of this documentation, and you could access them and check, how these looks like, and these are deployed. But basically, I just created very simple templates. So title slide, like the initial slide where you provide info about you and about, basically the first slide that you use in your presentation. Also blank slide, so it just has a header and footer, and the content, the whole middle part of this is free real estate. You can put whatever you want there. Then I implemented the image. So basically, when you want to have a slide that only contains an image in the center of the slide, so there's a template for that. Also, there's a split template. So that's a very also common pattern that I use in my talks. Like, you want to have some kind of bullet points on the left, and on the right, you want to provide some extra content. Like, you want to provide images or anything other than that. And also, if these templates does not suit you, there's a chance and there's an option for you, not a chance, I suppose, to create a custom template. So basically, all the elements to create a slide are exposed. Like, you could override your specific background, content part, footer, header, and what you see on the screen, like for the custom template, all of those parts could be implemented. And if even this layout does not work for you, there's a custom slide, which basically means, look, everything is a widget in Flutter. If you do not want to use whatever templates are provided, just implement the whole slide yourself. So you could just use whatever widgets you want to, and this will be rendered as any other page in any Flutter app. So the flexibility is on your side. So these are the templates and widgets. As I mentioned, from the widgets point of view, there's a bullet list component at the moment, and is the code highlighting component that could be used. And obviously, I think everyone would hate me if I wouldn't implement this. It's light and dark theme, and how it works. We can jump to the presentation. So I don't know, Alan, can I show the demo if that's okay?
Yeah,
maybe
please.
you have any other questions.
This is your episode, right? You want to? I think it's a good opportunity for you to get this out there. Just explain more in case people are only listening. But so you have your presentation. Yeah. This is from the event in Berlin, by the way.
Yes. So this is from Fluttercon, and I have another one which was the first iteration. It was from the Poland, from PL Droid, that I showed you. And actually, okay, maybe I'll show you this presentation because it has some cooler features, some cooler slides that shows the benefits of why you should use the FlutterDeck and why you should even use Flutter for your presentations. So as I mentioned, when you use FlutterDeck as the root of your project, you get some benefits. So first of all, the whole navigation tree is built for you, but also you have some controls, like I'm using right and left arrows, to navigate between slides. But also I can access the navigation drawer. Basically, it shows all the slides that are available in your slide deck, and you could jump straight to any of the slides if you want to, right? And also there's a really cool dark feature. Mode and light. Yeah, it's really useful, and it's it's switching between light and dark theme. And this is created not because it's cool, but it is very useful, because I think the main background and the main reason why I think I am able to create such framework is because I am a speaker myself. I have already some knowledge and some experience talking at various events in person and online. And I know that, some things you definitely need at your fingertips when you are on the venue. Like, for instance, you are in the venue that is not dark, like you are not in a cinema or anything like that, because in cinema environment, in cinema kind of venue, dark mode works all the time. Like you have dark background, you have, white or at least, light text there, and it looks great. Everyone could read that. Accessibility is really spot on. But if you come to the venue, which is a little bit brighter, maybe there's like sun coming from the windows, that just shows on your projector and on your screen. The dark slides does not work that well, and sometimes you need to switch the theme at that moment. And what you do is now, by using FlutterDeck, you can use it this way. If you build your presentation in Keynote or PowerPoint, probably you need to create two different presentations, or at least you need to prepare for that, right? So I think that's really the benefit that these simple features could bring to you. So that's why, basically, the main reason why dark and light, switching between a dark and light mode is really useful when talking about presentations and the talks itself. So about navigation and why FlutterDeck is really great, or why you should use Flutter overall for your presentations, especially when introducing to Flutter. So I can show you this slide. So for instance, what you see on this slide, it's not a video. Like, you want to show how well the Flutter performs, like you could use the slider to make the sea more angry, and you could make it a little bit calmer. And these things are just not possible if you have your presentations implemented in Keynote or PowerPoint or any other tools, or unless you are able to embed the web views or anything like that over there. But basically, if you want to show all the capabilities that Flutter has, like, it's meant for that. Like, if you have any intensive graphics inside your slides, if you want to showcase, imagine, I think I have a great slide for that. Like, you are presenting your app or the prototype for your investors, or you are presenting whatever, for your designers, or you are talking about design system. Actually, inside the slide, you are able to embed the whole app if you want to. So this thing is also not a video. It's like a very simple input that you could use. Is you could see the eyes of this bear. It tracks, the cursor that while I'm typing. Also, if you go to insert your password, it hides your eyes. So all of those, playful details, I would say, or very, more graphical intensive things. These are just not possible when you are building slides the normal way, the way that we are used to. So I think that's, especially when you have a Flutter, which is cross-platform framework that works on 6 different platforms at the moment, 7 if you include embedded, and you want to showcase the main features or the main benefit that Flutter brings on the table. Why not implement those slides in Flutter? And that was the main goal why I decided to create a framework. I wanted for the framework, I want to keep it lightweight, to cover all the nasty, all the really boring stuff that you need to cover, like building the slide deck itself, like building the routing for it, building all the navigation driver for it, implementing the light and dark themes, setting up the configuration. The main goal of this framework is just to provide you tools to create presentations, and everything that's left on your side is just creating the slides themselves, right? So you just define the slides and you just define the content that should be put there, and that's it. So that's the main goal for me, and for this whole framework. Yeah. As you mentioned, I'm talking a lot. Maybe you have any specific questions. We could, focus on something else or something more.
No, it's quite interesting. I'm kind of curious about, because the platforms you support, if you scroll up a bit, you support quite a few platforms, right? If you scroll up, yeah. So basically, you're supporting everything. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm curious. Yeah. I mean, obviously, I can understand Windows, web, Mac OS, Linux, obviously, but iOS, Android. Like, I'm curious about what that actually would look like if you try to actually use it on your phone.
At the moment, they will look terrible, and that's the answer.
Well, you
because
support it. You support it well, I guess. That was like the first thought. I was like, this is pretty cool.
Yeah, so I think there are two ways that you go. I mean, checking the slides on the phone, I think that shouldn't be really a strange use case, I suppose. Like if you want to, I don't know, check the content on the go, or maybe you're scrolling any social media and you found that, the speaker has published the slides and you just want to check the content. I think on mobile, it's pretty straightforward. You should open it and you just check the slides. But I think the main challenge is there, and I'm still a little bit confused in which direction I should go, is how to provide these slides on mobile devices. So the one way you should go is to keep the aspect ratio right. So meaning the slides would be a bit smaller on your device, but at least they keep the aspect ratio. And this way, these slides won't be, I don't know. Yeah, they will look relatively same as you look them all those on this web. But I think something nicer to have would be if I would be able to pull those predefined templates and make them responsive. So that's the reason why we have the auto size text as the dependency, because if you make the slides responsive, then you wouldn't need to to limit your users of what kind of device they're using and where they're watching the slides and where they're checking the content. So I'm still a little bit confused. I don't know which way I will go. The simplest solution would be, to keep the aspect ratio the same. And I think there's already one solution on pub.dev which already supports that. But to me, the more right way to go would be to be able to support the responsiveness of the slides. I don't know how the content should, restructure. I think that's a little bit more of responsibility on the speaker side of the owner of the slides who is creating those. But yeah, I would love to have those slides, responsive and just work on any device. So, but technically, you can run this framework on iOS or Android. There's no limitations on that, but how it looks like, I'm not responsible for that at the moment, right?
Yeah, well, I mean, I like the idea of, like giving a presentation about an app, and then you can include the app on the side next to it and kind of talk about it or whatever. I mean, it's really nice and really flexible. The other thing, sorry,
I'm
you say something?
No. I think I had a demo. Yeah, I have a demo for that.
Okay, I thought you just did
I'm prepared. I'm prepared.
Okay.
Not with the bear, but with an actual app. So, for instance, let me check the slide. It's Punter's demo. So, what you see on the screen there, it's actually, you have a FlutterDeck running, but inside the slide, a single slide, there's another material app. So meaning this app has its own navigation inside of it. So you could, it's an app working and you could navigate it. You could do some actions there. So this, the frame is just coming from a package, but actually this is another app embedded inside the slide. And it has, as I mentioned, it has its own navigation. You could use it as just embedding and showcase, like, as I told already, like if you're talking with your stakeholders or you're talking with your designers, for instance, you're creating design system for your app, right? And you need to prepare slides of what components you have implemented. You do not need any other tools. You could prepare slides on FlutterDeck and you could just import those components inside the slides. If you implemented buttons, if you implemented modal dialog windows or whatnot, you can just showcase them inside the slide. So that's the beauty of that. Like everything uses Flutter, like everything is a widget. You could just use that. And yeah, I see a really huge opportunity there and a really valid use case for that.
Well, I mean, the other thing that I see is, I guess you can almost have like, do you know Widgetbook, right?
Yeah.
You can kind of build something like a Widgetbook with this to a certain extent, except for you don't necessarily natively have that ability to enter in parameters and change things like they have. in theirs, but you can still like, I don't know, maybe if you have a bootstrap like style guide, like, okay, if you want to make a button, it should look like this, blah, 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 explain everything. Really side-by-side interactive.
Low key, yeah. If you check the code and if you check the structure of how the FlutterDeck app looks like, low key it was inspired by Widgetbook, because Widgetbook also, generates the whole navigation tree. It also has the root Widgetbook app, or I don't know the specific name for that widget, but it also, has a root app that you could use, and then you build a Widgetbook out of there. Shout out to Lucas, to the co-founder. Actually it was inspired, and it just makes sense for these kind of tools like Widgetbook. It like you want to showcase your components, so building all of the groups, categories for your components and showing them there. It's, when you think about it, it's the same about slides. You have the root component for the slide deck, and what you need only is to put the slides inside the list and just render the deck itself out of them. So it's really a very similar approach, as you mentioned already.
Have you actually used this? I mean, obviously you use it to build some presentations, but have you actually used it to present presentations recently?
Yeah, like the Fluttercon is already out, the recording of this talk, so you could check this on DroidCon page. So I presented this, and I also used this framework. Okay, not this framework, but the second iteration of that framework in Poland. Actually, it was, it wasn't already published, but actually the whole idea or the whole concept about GoRoute or about building the presentation, it was already there just in the local package. So I have already used those. And these two presentations are there in the documentation. You can check them out. But yeah, I think I mentioned it somewhere, maybe when I announced this package on Twitter. I think I told that it is kind of battle tested already. Like I already gave 2 presentations using this framework. So it's working, Of course, it's lacking some features and whatnot, but it's already there. You could also already use those.
Okay, I mean that's pretty powerful. I mean, you're already at version. Let's see, what is it? Version 030, right? What's next for feature wise? I mean, are you planning to bring on 1.0, or is it just going to stay like this for some time, or like what's kind of on your mind?
That was a very intentional decision not to publish this as a 1.0, like from the ground up, because I expect there will be some breaking changes. I'm still a little bit, I don't want to say lost, but I am still not sure if I made the right decision of how I provide the slide templates. So for instance, if you check how you need to use any template or how you implement slides overall inside by using FlutterDeck, you are extending the specific widget. So meaning I implemented the templates and the slides by using not a composition, but using inheritance. And when you're building Flutter apps, you're not extending custom classes, but you're extending the default, widgets that are provided for you. So these are stateless, stateful, or inherited widgets. These are like default building blocks for you. And then whatever is needed, you define in the build method. What I did is like I build, under the hood, these templates or these slides are extending stateless widgets. They implement the build method, but it's very convenient because you have kind of very FlutterDeck-ish API to use the slides. Like if you want to create a slide, I know that I need to extend at least the FlutterDeck slide or any specific component. So I know that I need to extend this class. And when I put this slide inside the list of my slides, I know that it will be supported. That's great, but also you could see it brings some challenges. Like you cannot really you're not that flexible about passing parameters, because this needs to be passed up until the root FlutterDeck slide widget that should build the widget itself out of that. Like also another limitation at this moment is that this configuration that you're overriding must be constant, because that's how it's supported at the moment. And I expect it won't work this for a long time when I introduce something inside the configuration that cannot be constant. For instance, you want to override the current theme of the slide and you want to first of all pull the theme from the theme.off context. You want to bring the theme from your context of the widget tree, and then you want to maybe adjust some stuff and pass it to the slide. So at the moment, this is not possible because I just chose this way. So I'm still experimenting with this framework. I mean, if you use it at this moment, all of the drawbacks I mentioned, these could be this could be overcome by just implementing the custom slide and defining your own build method and do whatever you want over there. But I'm still experimenting whether when more and more features are there, when there are more and more configuration options, where there are more variables inside the templates, inside the slides, or inside the configuration. I'm really still trying to find the best way, whether I will be able to support those in a convenient way by using inheritance instead of composition. So that's why it's still kind of beta version style. It's still, 0.x version and not a stable one, because I still expect there will be some breaking changes. I really hope those won't be like the changes that will force you to rewrite the whole presentation that you have already built. But yeah, I cannot guarantee that there won't be any breaking changes. So that's a very intentional decision of mine.
Okay. Well, I mean, it's always good to consider that things may break, right? And kind of how to handle them. Yeah. I mean, when do you think this would be in a state where you'd say like, okay, this is kind of feature complete? Like, is there like there's a couple of features that you're saying, okay, these things for sure are going to come in, and then you're going to kind of see where we are? Like, do you know what's coming up in the immediate pipeline?
Yeah, I kind of have a list, like what I'm planning to do. So first of all, I want to implement a decent theming that you could apply at the moment. You could apply the theming for the whole slide deck, but under the hood, the basic material theme is used. Like you're using scaffold backgrounds, the on background colors and whatnot. So I want to maybe create a custom theme, like if you have used any similar packages like Stream, Flutter Stream, like they are exposing their components, and they like specify, okay, if you want to have your custom colors or whatnot, you could specify your theme there. So I want to improve theming over there, and maybe allow it to define it globally, but also allow for each specific slide to override this theme, because it just makes sense. Also, I want to implement some more features over there. So I think about the features, the fundamental part, the structure that builds the whole presentation is already there. Like you could definitely build the presentation out of this, but obviously what's needed, it needs more templates, more versatile templates, like that when a speaker chooses FlutterDeck, it won't need, the speaker won't need to implement any custom templates. They will be at your fingertips. Like if you're coming from the previous experience of using Keynote or PowerPoint, there are already a lot of templates, and it's very rare case when you need anything very custom, right? So you just choose the template and use that. So of course, I will add some more templates, but I think in Flutter, it's just a very straightforward way to do it. And I think those won't cause any big issues. So templating, maybe a little bit more versatile controls over your slide deck. So for instance, at the moment, it's not really possible to navigate the slide deck if you're using touchscreen devices, because all of the navigation between slides currently is based on the keyboard and keyboard shortcuts. You can define your custom keyboard shortcuts, but if you want to use the swipe motion or something like that, it's currently not possible. So I want to cover this case, that if you're using mobile device, you just could easily navigate through your slide deck. So definitely controls. So for instance, when I'm presenting, I'm always using the clicker, like the hardware tool to navigate the slide. So I want to make sure that this slide deck will work with the popular hardware, which is usually using just a keyboard shortcuts. But I just want to make sure that these are covered. Maybe I want there's there's already a request to export your slides as a PDF or something like that. I don't know if that's somewhere there at the top of the list, but I see a need for that. For instance, if you want to see the outline of your slides. So you could do that. So these are just, something that on the top of my head. I don't want to, to say that all of this needs and has to be implemented before I go to the 1.0 version. But I think the main stone, or the main step that will show whether the framework is mature enough, when I will be confident about the inheritance and composition issue I already mentioned, when I implemented those smaller features, and if I see that everything is still really convenient, comfortable, and not breaking anything around that, when I feel that, I'm adding new features, but these are not breaking the existing functionality or the existing framework, I think, that would be an indication that, okay, maybe this is already ready for 1.0. Because once you release 1.0 version, then any breaking change, will cause the major update for your package. It's not a big deal if you check the Go router. I think it's already on 9 or 10 major version, because a lot of breaking changes were introduced in that. But I want, for the people to feel that, okay, once this is 1.0, that I can use this package, and I could expect that it won't break unless, something major happens in the Flutter ecosystem, maybe another major Flutter release that will cause, any breaks. So no, I just want to cover that. Yeah, people could be as confident as confident they could be.
Awesome. Is there anything that we didn't cover that you wanted to make sure people knew about before we start to wrap up?
I don't think so. I mean, the main things were already covered, right? But what's needed now is to wait for more speakers to actually use this framework to build their own presentations. So I'm really happy that I'm a speaker myself, and when I was creating whatever was needed for my presentation, I just implemented that straight and injected that straight into the framework. So I know that everything that was based on my needs is already there and it's already implemented. But I think a very good indication is if other speakers in the Flutter ecosystem will start using this framework, and if they notice that, okay, I need this, maybe I'm missing this, maybe something is not working, and they will start creating issues, maybe they'll start contributing themselves to the framework. I think that would be a good maturity indication for the framework that okay, actually that's what the speaker needs outside of this framework, right? So I'm waiting for this. I'm waiting for upcoming bigger Flutter conferences, because this comes in waves. People are not using this framework throughout the whole year. They are not constantly creating their presentations like 24/7 or something like that. If there's a bigger Flutter conference or bigger presentation that you should make, only then there's a spike where technically and probably more people could use this framework. So I'm waiting for those spikes now, to notice what's actually needed for this framework to be implemented. So yeah, what I wanted to say, I'm really looking forward to the feedback, especially from those who are actually using this framework for their talks, for their actual talks, and what they're needing. So I'm really looking forward for that moment when I receive this and I can improve the framework.
Awesome. Well, obviously people can go to look up the package. It's called the name is
FlutterDeck.
FlutterDeck. I'm like, what? I kept thinking about another name for some weird reason. FlutterDeck. Obviously, they can also reach out to you too. I think through Twitter is probably the easiest method. So what's your Twitter handle?
Any social media works. My Twitter handle is mkobolis. It's a Lithuanian word. MK is my initials of my name. Obolis is apple in English. So they can look at that like that. It's fun because the backstory behind this is that I created this email when I bought my first Apple device, like ever. So I created this email specifically for that because I needed to create the iTunes account or something like that. So yeah,
makes sense.
That's the backstory.
Well, in that case, now that we learned about this project, I might give it a try and see how it goes. Because I'm not very good at PowerPoint, but I can use a little bit of Flutter. So maybe it might be interesting to see how it goes. And with that, again, thanks for coming on, and hopefully we'll have you back on for the third time. Hopefully not as long as it's been. for the next time.
On episode number 200 or something like that.
Yeah, maybe I should actually take a look to see how many episodes we have left until we have some kind of 200 episode or something. I think we already went past 100 or something. Yeah, we did 100. We'll be at 200 pretty soon.
Yeah, I mean, you're very good with your pace. I hope that you get there pretty soon.
I try to do one a week. It's not easy sometimes. I've missed a couple, but it's hopefully get it back into the thing. All right, thank you again.
Thanks for having me, Alan. As always, it's very fun to be here.